now I turn to Ian's book. First thing that struck me is how the hell did this guy find out so much stuff, especially in the first half of the book, which was all news to me. And in fact, I have to admit that John Buse was largely news to me. I also knew him. I never met him though, and I never met Judith Wright. I met all the prime ministers, but not them. And it was a world apart from me. And I heard on the news all the stuff that Eddie Hagel was doing, and I felt guilty. And I felt even more guilty now in this book, because I did so little when I could have done something, but I didn't. It wasn't my scene, or so I thought. And as time went on, I was working on other things, but I always had the Great Barrier Reef in my mind. I always tripped up here whenever I could. And so I got a postdoc, of all things, to work on corals, and I knew nothing about corals at all. My PhD was on insect physiology. I mean, how far, well, can you get from that? But the thing that the book did for me was start to give me another round of guilty conscience. I turning over the pages because I'd been there, I was part of that, and all these meetings, the government inquiry and so on. Well, the big government inquiry was held on the beach at Ames. I was Ames's first scientist, and it was hot, and these guys from Canberra turned up in their suits and they complained, much to my amusement. And so I was always wheeled out to talk about this and that part of the reef and to answer questions, until the guy, I don't know who it was, ran the whole show. He asked me after, he said, "What are your qualifications? You've got a PhD?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What in?" "Insect physiology." "Okay, none of your evidence is admissible." I got really pissed off. And so I went back home and I wrote to my old university and said, "I want a DSc all about corals." And they said, "Okay." And so that meant so little to me, I didn't even turn up to my own graduation, but at least I couldn't be turfed out of the next government inquiry. But there were no more government inquiries. History had taken its turn, and as you know, finally the Great Barrier Reef got its just recognition. That period though, going back to the time of John Buse, was a weird time for me. I never met him. And so if someone had stopped there and said, "Who's this John Buse guy?" I would have said, "Oh, I think he had a lot to say. He was some sort of hippie that used to round on politicians all the time." And that's really as far as it went for me. And so I referred the inquirer to maybe to Judith Wright's book, and that was that. It was with great interest and again self-flagellation, for want of a better word, that I read about a time when I really didn't help anything like as much as I could have done. I want to have a few words. I know I haven't got much time, because Ian didn't want me to talk about any of this. He wanted to talk about science, but anyhow. I want to talk a bit about Ian. I know Ian quite well. And it all came about when he wrote his The Great Barrier Reef, A Passionate History, because he kept ringing me up about this and that. Anyhow, it came to the time of its launch in Sydney. And I thought, okay, I'll go down to that. I don't like book launches, and I didn't want another book about the history of the Great Barrier Reef. I'd already helped out with several, but I started reading the book. Ian doesn't know this. When I got on the plane, and sorry, Ian, but I read it, and I read it, and I read it. I thought I knew all about that old history stuff, and I didn't, and I was reading it in the taxi before I was going to the launch, and was hoping I didn't have to say anything, because It was all news to me, and that's how I actually came about to learn about this extraordinary person. And so I had to ask myself, what makes Iain McCalman tick? What happened across the other side of the Indian Ocean all those long time ago, well, sort of, and that gave him the will to write not just history, he's a historian for sure, but about people. He's always been into people, and that is something I find absolutely fascinating. In a sort of roundabout way, I saw why he writes about people and takes a great interest in people, because they are what counting. Like Iain, I find people so interesting. Iain's got this incredible perspective of the word, but knowledge to pursue the history of people and what they've done. And I'm just wondering, if he can write that book about John Boost, what else is in his head? He must live in a world which is just unknown to us mere mortals. He knows all about people and what they do and why they do it. And I would just wish that Iain would live to be 1,000 years old, because he'll be writing books that really matter. And this book today, it really matters. John Buse from now on will be there for everybody. He's immortalized, and he will be intellectually rewarded for the enormous contribution that he made, unknown even to the likes of me until that book. So I personally thank John for enlightening me about stuff that I really should have known a long time ago. Iain has got this special knack. I want you to question him, and I want you to ask him why he's not writing a book about himself, because heavens above, someone who knows all that stuff about people and who is not backward in coming forward, is a brilliant writer. He needs to write a book about himself, squeezed in amongst the books about other things, it must be in his head, that actually matter. So that's what I've got to say.